Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Professor Vipin Jojo from School of Social Work, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. Today we are going to talk about social aspects of poverty, which is part of the course Rural Development. What we intend to learn or discuss today as part of today's lesson is understand the concept of poverty, how the poverty is conceptualized in India over the years. And I'm sure by the end of this lesson, at least we'll get an idea about what is poverty and how poverty is conceptualized. Now, India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Yet, there are issues like poverty, unemployment, inequalities, and long-standing socio-economic evils. And some of these issues are great concern as a nation, as a country. Deprivation of meeting the basic necessities of human life and which forbids to live a life with dignity. If we are not able to have the basic necessities like food, shelter, clothing, that affects to live a life with dignity. And so it becomes very, very important concern for any citizen or any human being, irrespective of country or society. In India, poverty has a root cause both as the individual dimension as well as the structural dimensions. When I say individual dimensions, could be something to do with somebody's abilities or capacities, like skills, education qualifications, and so on and so forth. At the same time, it also has structural dimension, which is part of the social structure or the economic structure of the society, which perpetuates or which causes poverty. So, what we will look at, that we will understand about poverty today. Now, poverty is like a plague, and it is prevalent in almost all the countries in the world, and it has got many faces and dimensions. It is not only a social phenomenon, but also it includes socio-cultural, economic, historical, geographical dimensions. Therefore, it is difficult to define the concept of poverty in very, very precise manner, because it has contextual, it has got time and space, and so with the time and the space and the place, this can be defined or this can be conceptualized differently for different people. Yet, the concept of poverty has been defined with the monetary terms, with its monetary values, calculating both monetary and non-monetary elements to the life and try to calculate in terms of monetary value. And so poverty many times is looked at or measured in terms of monetary terms or in quantitative terms. How do we define poverty? In human terms, it is something like one should have enough to eat or enough to wear clothes or place to live, that is housing. So unless we have place to sleep or stay or food and clothing, we cannot say that we are free from poverty. And so in India, these three things are considered to be the very, very, very basic elements, that is called roti, kapda, or makan. And so these three elements are part of the basic aspects of living. So inability to attain these aspects affect the minimum standard of living, which means if we are not able to have or acquire these basic things, which means one person or we are living in poverty. So failure in meeting some of these basic requirements, which affects to maintain the minimum standard of living, means we are living in poverty. So that affects basic standard of living, that affects the basic decent life, and so one can define that that person is in poverty. Modern understanding of poverty requires other factors as well, such as education, mortality, malnutrition, access to health care, women empowerment, and overall social development or overall standard of living, and holding many other assets like toilets, electricity, road, and other kind of dimensions. So in the present context, it has gone beyond that monetary dimensions and added many other social dimensions to conceptualize this poverty. So in one hand, how much to eat or how much to wear. At the same time, one has to see whether one has access to education, whether one has to access to healthcare. So there are many of such kind of social dimensions or social development indicators which comprise or which are used to measure the poverty. And so in economic terms, if we are looking at, one can look at either it is absolute poverty or relative poverty. When we say absolute poverty, it is sheer deprivation or non-fulfillment of bare minimum needs for anyone's existence. That is food, shelter, health, education, and so on, so forth, and so on and so forth. So underdeveloped or developing countries of the world experience, many of these countries experience this kind of absolute type of poverty, where people do not have enough to eat. They are starving. They are living with malnutrition. They do not have absolute inaccessibility to healthcare. Though there are institutions, but they are not able to access the healthcare, or they are not able to get the healthcare services whichever is available because of many other aspects like transportation or communication problems. And so one can find that many of the developing or underdeveloped countries like India, one can find absolute poverty. When it comes to relative poverty, it is customarily ensures adequate resources to maintain an acceptable way of life in a society. Relative poverty is related with high income countries where one can see that, okay, less or more, sufficient or insufficient. Where people are poor because they cannot maintain a equivalent standard of life in the society. And so relative poverty is based on inequality and differences in standard of living. So individuals, families, and groups in the population can be said to be in poverty when they lack resources to obtain a standardized way of life which is accepted as the common minimum life in a society. So how do we measure poverty? As I said, it has got economic dimension, which is measured very quantitative way, quantified manner. And also, of late, we have added many of the social dimensions to it. So we have quantitative, very economic indicators. At the same time, we also have social dimensions, and so social indicators also are to be taken care of when we are measuring poverty. However, traditionally it has been dominated by the monetary approach, that is economic approach, and so it is very quantified. Yet in recent times, we have tried to use multiple approaches like capability approach provided by Amartya Sen. Sometimes we are also using participatory approach, and sometimes we are also even looking at social exclusion approach. So whether people are provided enough capital or conditions so that their ability to do something, their capability is increased or enhanced. In the same way, whether the people, they're allowed or they are provided space to participate in their own development. It is not like somebody decides and so that person develops, or development or the people living above poverty line is determined based on somebody's criteria or somebody's conceptualization. But the people should be able to participate, but people should be able to be part of that processes so that they can determine, they can decide their development and say that whether they are going above poverty line or below poverty line. Similar way, social exclusion provides whether people, certain section of the society, whether they are provided enough spaces to participate in the development processes, or whether they have been excluded, where we can benefit the development indicators like health or education or nutrition and so on and so forth. So one can look at these multiple approaches to measure or to understand and poverty, which would go beyond measuring in terms of numbers or in terms of quantitative aspects, and so it is very, very multidimensional deprivation. It has to be looked at that it is deprivation not merely health or food or clothing, but there are many other social or structural dimensions. So it is multidimensional deprivation. So what are those multiple dimensions of poverty? Now, to understand this comprehensive nature of poverty, it is essential to measure the poverty with multiple dimensions, as I said, such as life expectancy, literacy, access to health facilities, mortality, maternity benefits, safe drinking water, pure air, women empowerment, energy consumption, assets holding, sanitation, clear surrounding, participation in the democratic processes, or participation in decision-making processes. So all these are to be taken care when we are trying to measure or trying to understand poverty. Now, how does the state government or the government of India, nation state of India, has tried to conceptualize or tried to measure poverty? If we look at historically how it has evolved. Now the present National Institute for Transforming India, which is known as Niti Aayog, estimates the poverty by calorie intake. Before the Niti Aayog came in, the Planning Commission, since the independence, Planning Commission was the key institution which was trying to assess, which was trying to measure poverty. So by considering age, gender or sex, activity, etc., and the Indian Council of Medical Research proposes that 2400 calorie intake for the rural person per day and 2100 calorie per person per day in urban areas as the level of people living above poverty. So if someone in the rural area is able to have food which contains 2400 calorie per day per person in rural areas, that person is above poverty line. Similarly, in the urban areas, if it is 2100 calorie per day per person, that person can be considered above poverty line. So calorie intake is one of the key measurements to measure whether the person is below poverty line or above poverty line. If we look at chronologically how this measurement of poverty in India has evolved. After independence, first time the government of India set up working group in 1962. for defining poverty lines, constituting with eminent economist and social thinker under the chairmanship of Professor D.R. Gandhian. This commission defined the poverty by aligning with the inputs from Nutrition Advisory Committee of the ICMR in 1955, which prescribed the balanced diet, what should be the balanced diet for a person. So it includes this committee which was formed in 1962, which also took the inputs from this National Advisory Committee of ICMR to add on to this balanced diet, which is the calorie intake component of estimation of poverty. This committee defined the national minimum consumption expenditure of household of 4 adults, which 4 adults consumption units, which should not be less than rupees 20 per month in rural areas. Those days in 60s, and 25 rupees per month in urban area. So for a household or for a family of 4, a family of 5 with 4 adults, they should be able to have 20 rupees per month for their consumption in rural areas and 25 rupees per month in the urban area. So if they had 24 rupees, 20 rupees in rural areas, that time it was considered that family was, or that household was above poverty line. And similarly, for monthly expenditure, if it is worked out with this rate, it used to be 100 rupees per month in rural areas and 125 rupees in urban areas. So the estimated amount supposed to meet the energy requirements for an active and healthy life, which includes food, clothing, shelter. However, it did not include the expenditure on health and education. 15 years later, of this planning commission constituted a task force in 1997 under the chairmanship of Dr. Y.K. Alagh for projections of minimum needs and effective consumption demand. It estimated, based on the observed consumer behavior, of monthly per capita expenditure on food and non-food items. So how much a consumer spent on food items, food we know what all we eat, non-food items, it could be health, education, clothing, and other kind of necessary things. So food items could be regular consumption, but non-food items need not be regular. So it could be over a period of 1 month or few months, but food items have to be spent or consumed, food has to be consumed every day, so the expenditure might be there on regular basis, on daily basis. So they try to calculate the food and non-food items as part of this assessment of this consumer expenditure. It fixed 49 rupees per capita per month to meet the calorie intake of 2400 in rural areas, whereas it was fixed for 2100 calorie for the urban areas. However, this committee also emphasized to draw up state-specific poverty lines, because every state, every region has got different conditions. It has got its own geographical conditions. It has got its own topography, climatic condition, socio-cultural conditions, and accessibility to resources or availability of resources. And so there were variations in terms of economic, in terms of socio-cultural context, and so-geographical context. And so this committee in 1989 suggested that there should be state-specific poverty lines against the all India poverty line. Instead of having one uniform poverty line for all India level, there should be a poverty line for different states differently. So for rural area, there should be one poverty line. For urban area, there should be one poverty line. and so it was more contextualized and more state specific. And also that included rural areas and urban areas. For rural areas in every state, there will be different line of poverty. In urban area in every state, again, different line of poverty could be separately decided. So Planning Commission constituted, again, an expert group under the chairmanship of Professor Suresh Tendulkar in 2005. So Tendulkar Committee estimated 21.9% of our Indian population living below poverty line in the year 2011-12. However, this committee's recommendations was not free from criticism. And so another expert committee which was headed by Rangarajan has been constituted in 2012. And as part of this Rangarajan committee's recommendation, the All India ratio stands to 29.5% people of Indian population living below poverty line. So one can see that there is no uniformity in terms of measuring the poverty line, and so it will be, unless we agree on this concept, that how we measure, how we conceptualize this poverty, we will not be able to have a single a single percentage or single number which can say that this much of people or this many percentage or this many people are living below poverty line or above poverty line. One can look at different rounds of data which are collected by National Sample Survey Organization, which provides the data to be able to use to measure the poverty. So over the period of time, the NSSO has been collecting data on the expenditure of the people, of the individuals at the household level as well as individual level on food items as well as non-food items over the years, over the months, and so those data are used to calculate poverty line in the country. Now, the incidence of poverty in India is a matter of great concern, as we had discussed in the beginning. And so, because of this variation, as I said, Tendulkar Committee has calculated one figure. Then Rangarajan Committee came up with another figure. And so there are variations where the suggestions or recommendation of by the recommendation by different committees. However, one can see that India has still about more than 300 million people who are living below poverty line or who are considered to be poor, who can be identified as poor. And so if we use the international standards or international poverty line of $1 per day, which was used in the year 1993, purchasing power parity exchange rates, then the percentage of poor people in India is even higher than more than 300 million people, which is about 34% of Indian population. If we can make it to $2 per day, then it goes up to around 80% of our people who are living as poverty or below the poverty line. However, Tendulkar Committee's estimate is one of the very, very important recommendations which have tried to include the basket of different deprivations, and that has included both economic as well as non-economic dimensions. So it has got multi-dimensional deprivation index, and that based on that, in fact, the percentage of people living below poverty line even goes more than what the Tendulkar Committee has found. In terms of non-income dimensions of poverty too, such as infant mortality or maternal mortality rates, all literacy level and gender inequalities, India continues to display in the kind of very pathetic or very poor condition. According to the poverty estimate of 1973-74, more than half of the total population in the country were living below poverty line. Over the years, this has declined, and as part of the Tendulkar committee, one can find that it has come up to now 27.5%. And so, if we look at over the years, it has definitely reduced. In 73-74, it was about 55%. In 2004 and 5, it has come down to 27.5%. So this has definitely improved. However, this decline has been observed in both rural and urban areas. While rural areas, the poverty ratio declined from 56% in 73-74 to 28% in 2004 and 5. In urban areas, it went down from 49% in 1973-74 to 26% in 2004 and 5. So one can see that overall there is a decrease in the poverty ratio, both in rural as well as urban area. We have seen over the years it has reduced. However, the absolute number of rural poor declined from 244 million in 1993-94 to around 221 million in the year 2004-2005. By this data, one might conclude that there is a shift in poverty in India from rural to urban areas. Because there is a decrease in absolute numbers and there is increase of urban poverty in the urban areas. And so one can see that there is a shift. However, what could be the reason for this? Why in the rural area the poverty is decreasing and in the urban area the poverty is increasing? One reason could be an increase in out-migration of the poor from the rural area to urban areas in search of employment, in search of livelihood opportunities. So the people, in terms of numbers, reducing the rural areas, and since the people are migrating to the urban areas, the rural poor going and settling in the urban area, and also in the villages number is increasing, but the number in rural urban areas is increasing. And when they come to they come to urban area, they are also classified as part of the urban poor. So in the urban area, they are enumerated as part of the NSSO survey when it is done, they are enumerated as the poor in the urban area. So urban area, the numbers of poor is going up. Whereas in the rural area, the number is going down because this could be one of the reasons why we see that decrease in the numbers of rural poor and the increase in the urban poor. Thank you.